Hey guys, it's Nick. Thanks for tuning into Long Island Wargaming. This is a video response to Paul K, who posed this question to all of us. How many concessions should you give an opponent in order to be a good sportsmanship or a good sport and hopefully score a good sportsmanship score? And that's just a tough question. Um, Friendly gaming, you know, you do what you got to do. Local tournaments, you do what you got to do. But for me, if I'm going to a GT, which is what he went to, I'm paying money to go to this event. Crossroads, in particularly, is $65. I'm paying $65 to go play Warhammer. I expect all the other people that are paying that much money to produce well, fair played games and be able to understand the rules. And or if they are a newer player, they put that up front right away. My buddy John went away with us to one of the crossroads, and he's a relatively newer player to 8th edition specifically, and he would just tell all of his opponents, listen, I don't know all the rules. If there's something I do wrong, please let me know. I want this to be enjoyable to you. That's great. He's aware of the fact that he doesn't know the rules in and out, and that was very good, and I think a lot of people appreciated that. And then you know, there are a couple people that I've played in the past that, well, no, this is what the rule says, and then you go through well, that was 6th edition, that was 8th edition, blah 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 blah. And I will be honest, that is me sometimes. I've got so many editions of Warhammer, at this point 3 editions, rattling around in my head that sometimes I just get a rule wrong. We all do it, and Paul addressed that. We all do it sometimes, and it is what it is. But for me personally, as much as I would like people to know what they're doing at GT, I am also there to have fun, which, unless I'm on the top 10 tables or if I'm ranking in the top 10, I'll be a little bit more of a dick because I've been there and people have been a bit more of a dick back to me. And that was one of the things he was saying, do you be a dick? Do you don't be a dick? Well, it depends on what you're looking for. And I'm playing to have fun. My job at work, I am micromanaging people and correcting people and being a dick at times, and that's not what I'm looking for when I go away for the weekend. I want to drink a beer. I want to meet some people that enjoy this awesome game that I enjoy and they enjoy, and they're from all over the, you know, tri-state New England area. It's great to meet people. But little rules like, the 1 inch rule and wheeling. Wheeling to me is something that is so bizarre sometimes. People do it so differently. And the small 3-game tournament I went to this past weekend, every time I made a wheel, especially with my big, horde, I would ask my opponent, "Does that look fair to you?" And he would say, "Yeah, that's fine." And they were all very, very cool with it, and that's great. But you know, when I play Ryan, who is more of a uh, particular player, he likes to make sure that the wheel is correct, which I don't blame him. But when you've got a unit of 10 guys wide, the let me get this right, the circumference of a bigger circle or a wheel is longer. So you might not be able to wheel 90 degrees because your unit is so big. And that's a math thing, and it's not always easy to calculate. I mean, there are some tools that allow you to wheel, but it might not create the perfect circumference that you're looking for a perfect wheel. So that's why I like to communicate with my opponents. If I'm dropping a cannonball shot, communication is key. They might not know the rules, but at least if you're showing the fact that you're communicating with them, I'd rather do something and say, is this fair, or do you agree that this will work this way? Before I do it, find out that what I'm trying to do is successful, and then my opponent be like, no. It's like rolling that cannon shot that kills the demon prince, and then him coming back and your opponent being, well, actually, that impassable would prevent you from shooting at that angle, blah, blah, blah. So I think communication is key. And that is why when you roll for charges, you measure first. This way, everything is very precise, and there's no ambiguity of, is this a 13-inch charge or is it a 14-inch charge? It should all be there, and it should be very, very straightforward. So, what else can I ramble on here? So one thing Paul was saying was, at one point, my opponent feels like I'm just teaching them. That's a pain in the ass, especially when you're going to these tournaments where you are on a time restraint. And some people are just slower players than others. Anthony from the Sustainable Center, from all the GTs I went to with him, his games are all done in like 80 minutes or less. He barely pushes over an hour. It might be because he's Bretonian. It's either you win or you lose right away. But I mean, his games just go quick. Where some players, they're just not fast because maybe they're used to the basement gaming or they're used to, just having a good time and seeing what happens. And that sometimes aggravates players. I'm not a super slow player. I am a slow player, not super slow. I usually get all my games done. I usually do. Am I pushing the 2 hour, 2.5 hour mark? Sometimes, yeah. But this past weekend, when I went to the 3 game tournament, one of my opponents, nice guy, I could tell he hasn't played too many games based on the list that he brought, and some of the questions I could see that were just in his head, but he didn't say out loud. And nothing wrong with the guy. He was great. He was fun, and he was having a fun time. He was glad to be playing me. I just met him. He was having a good time, and he was just having a good time, and that's why I felt good about it all. But we only got through 4 of 6 turns because of that. And it wasn't like we were stopping to do rules. It was just a very slow played game, slow dice rolling. But the objective scenario that I was playing required me to use all 6 turns. By the way, I set myself up. It was objectives. I had to go forward, go back, cover objectives, and I was set to win this game by turn 6. We only got through turn 4, and I ended up losing the game, even though I had everything I needed to complete the game, but that was it. We ended the 2.5 hour mark, which some people might say, well, that's your fault. But if I went into it knowing what I wanted to do and know that, well, by turn 6, my slaves will be across the board and capture that objective, am I really at fault because I didn't have a chance to finish the game? I don't know. And it wasn't too much of a did my player know what he was doing versus did he not. It was just a time situation. But I feel like him knowing his rules a little bit better would have sped the game up. But it wasn't the end of the world because, like I said, he was having a good time, and it was a small 3 game 1 day tournament at the local hobby shop. If that would have happened to me at the GT where I lost the game from that, I would have been a little upset. I probably would have pushed the player along a little bit more, and I might even have pleaded my case. Look, in turn 5 and 6, I'm going to get these objectives and win. And I kind of, poked fun a little bit. I was like, oh, it looks like it got down to the wire there, but it looks like if I had turn 5 and 6, I would have won. And he was like, yeah. So he understood, but it was a fun game. So, that's one thing that I was kind of thinking about. One thing Paul was saying was the sportsmanship score. It's a popularity contest. People lobby you for the points and whatnot. When he was talking about that, it kind of gave me the idea of why not a different category instead of or in addition to, where you just write yes or no. And that category is, did your opponent know his rules? And it doesn't necessarily need to be used for tie breaking or ranking or even published on the standings list at the end of the tournament. It could just be something that the GT organizer just looks at. And if he sees that 3 of 5 games the opponent picked that his opponent did not know their rules, then maybe the GT organizer could send the guy an email or send him or pull him aside, be like, listen, a couple of your opponents thought that you might not have known your rules. Just try to be a little bit more prepared next time. That would be a cool solution. And I know Paul said he didn't know what kind of solution, to suggest, but that's the one I'm suggesting. Maybe on the score sheets, just a little thing. Did my opponent know his or her rules? It could be done at the end of the tournament. It could be done when you hand in your slip. Who cares? But that's something worth discussing. Because if you're playing an opponent that just doesn't know his rules, it slows the game down and it makes for a more inefficient game. Now, when I say knows his rules, I mean like fundamentals. I'm not talking about the Skaven player that has to open his book every time a different war machine misfires because that happens all the time. This past 3 day, the past game, tournament I went to, I rolled triples for my hell pit. It doesn't really happen too much, so I had to refer to the chart so I could see, what happens. And I didn't have that chart memorized, but nonetheless, I had to refer to it, and that's the kind of referring I'm okay with. But when it's do these guys have weapon skill 4 or weapon skill 7? Well, those are two different weapon skills. Like those are the kind of things I expect you to kind of know. You don't have to be super prepared. If you don't know them and you have a reference sheet out, that's fine. I love when players are like, "Oh, here's my freaking reference sheet and it's got miscast and blah blah blah." But I mean, if somebody doesn't know how a reform works, that's the kind of thing I would tell a GT organizer or a TO. My opponent did not know his rules. Doesn't mean he was bad sport. Maybe it could be a separate category. This guy was super nice, super fun, but he consistently moved his units within 1 inch of impassable terrain, forcing me to lose the game because I thought I was able to hold down that position or something silly like that. Another thing to look at, and Paul was saying, it gets to that point where do I just tell him like, yeah, 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 that's fine. There's an interesting topic here. There's cheating versus omitting rules. Sometimes there's a rule that your opponent forgets to use or do that is in their favor. Do you keep your mouth shut, or are you a good sport and saying, oh, don't forget to, blah blah blah, or don't forget to, get that roll your dice for your death spell so you can get some additional power dice. Like, do you just keep your mouth shut and be like, his loss, knowledge is power, he didn't play correctly, or are you supposed to tell him? And that's kind of an ethics thing there, or kind of, do you help your opponent out? Do you want for an honest and fair game? I mean, I felt terrible. One of my GT games, on the ride home, I was thinking about how I slaughtered my opponent, and I probably still would have if I didn't make the mistake I made, but I had Death Frenzy out, and I forgot like 2 turns to roll my D6 on how many Storm Vermin I lost, and that could have been 12 Storm Vermin. And I almost like felt like emailing the kid and being like, listen, I kind of gypped you out there at the end. My apologies. But like in this case, I didn't know my rules or I forgot about my rules and it helped me. But in the case where, my opponent forgets to do something that's supposed to help them, you know, do I tell them no, too bad, or not bring it up? I mean, I don't know. It's a gray line. There's some things I am okay with helping my opponent out when it comes to, if they forgot to do something in a previous phase. I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but I mean, if you've got the fast cav unit all the way over to your left flank and everything else is on the right side of the board, and we're already in shooting, we've already finished magic. The guy looks over and be like, "Oh shit, I forgot to move my reavers. Do you mind if I move them?" I'd be like, "Yeah, go for it." Like, it's not like he's cheating. It's something that he forgot to do. And the way I look at it is, would I have forgotten to do that? And if you get an opponent that says, no, too late, we moved on, then you know what? Then it's fair game. Be a dick from in on out. You don't give them a chance. And it kind of gets to that point where during some of your games, you guys keep giving each other some leeway and some slack until one person says, okay, that's it. And they stop being forgiving. And then you move forward. Then you don't give any forgiveness back. But I mean, just the other day, I had a rat dart that was going to go run down a war machine on the side of the field, and he was just on the side of the board. Everything else was moved up. I move into magic. I move into shooting. I didn't even get to combat yet, and it wasn't a charge turn. It was the turn before I would be able to get a successful charge. But I was like, oh, dude, I totally forgot to move my rats. 12 inches forward. They were on this side of the board. I was going to send them towards your cannon. My opponent said, okay, go for it. Did it help him? No, because odds are I'm going to tie up his cannon for his turn. But it was my intentions and my honesty that he's like, okay, that's fair, and that makes for a fun game because you have these time pressures where I'm trying to do right by my opponent by getting my turn done so he can go, but I forget about my little rat dot in the corner. Where if it's basement gaming and I'm sitting there drinking a beer and eating a hot dog, I get to sit back and look at the board, move some things, talk to my cousin or my friend or my brother or whoever's playing with me. And then, oh, I forgot to do that. And it's you just have time, which you don't always have time in these GTs. Brawler's Bash, by the way, was awesome because you had 3 hours for a turn, but that was a 3K turn, 3K game. But anyway, try to be forgiving. This way, people can, help you out where need be. But if you could tell your opponent is going for blood, then you go for blood too. And I've learned that the hard way because I played an opponent last GT that just abused the rules left and right. He legally abused them with the conga lining bullshit, and that kind of pissed me off. But you know what? He was out for blood, and we were on table like 5 or 6, so we were up there, and he was going for table one. I was just going because, hey, I'm here to play. I'm here to have some fun. But after that, I'm like, I gotta stop being so nice because he was a nice guy verbally. We had a drink, we hung out, we talked. But I mean, on the table, he was like, no, this is what the rules say. I'm going with it, and I feel less bad about it doing that to people, especially if it's a neck to neck game. I saw in one of the comments, who was it? Let me take a quick here. Skaven and AZ. If I'm crushing my opponent and it doesn't matter, I'll let it go. Awesome. So you know what? You speed the game up, you win. Who cares? I'm okay with that. But do you educate your opponent though? This way he doesn't screw that up next time you play him or for the next opponent. Like, if all game someone's forgetting to do an additional -1 for moving and shooting or for long range, you're gonna want to tell your opponent that. This way, they can uh, they can do it correct in the future game. Or if they're doing something that hurts them, then you at least tell them, listen, in next games, make sure that, such and such a unit doesn't have to, take the penalty for move and shoot or something stupid like that. Maybe after the game, you find some time to help out your opponent or give them some advice. But it depends on what kind of player you are. I'm not a total jerk when it comes to the GTs. Um, Another thing, and this will be the last topic, is when we go to these GTs, especially Warhammer YouTubers, for some people that recognize us or know who we are, there is some sort of expectation that we do things correct. And it's kind of unwritten, but if I go to a GT and I just butcher rules or I don't correct my opponent, it kind of speaks to me being, inadequate in my knowledge of the game. That's why, you know, one of the people I played this past weekend, he was like, "Oh my gosh, I watched some of your videos. It's cool to play you." If there was like one or two things I corrected him on, he was like, "Dude, thank you." Like he was very appreciative of that, and I feel like there's somewhat of an expectation, or um, yeah, that's it really, an expectation that we should know what we're doing because we're on YouTube, not perfect people, but we're talking about the game, publishing our thoughts and our opinions and how we play the game. We should have some standard and level expectation to do everything as right and as correct as possible. So I think I've run out of things on this topic, but it's a gray area. You got to figure out, you know, what kind of player you are. And you know what? Communication, like I said, is key. A lot of my GT games, I'll tell people, listen, I'm a pretty easygoing player. If you mess something up, just let me know right away. You can take it back and then we'll fix it. If it's game changing, it might not be okay, but we'll discuss it. We'll call over a TO, and if you want to extend the same courtesy to me, that would be great. If the person's a dick, I'll be a dick back. But otherwise, we're here to play a game, and unless you're going for blood and glory and you want first place, then you know what? Do what the hell you got to be. Douchebaggery is free game if you're going for it, but hopefully you play that person first round, and then games 2, 3, 4, 5 are fun and dandy. So let me know what you guys think. I'm going to link below Paul's original video. If you haven't checked that out already, check him out, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.